Brian's probably a little behind game one because his deck is a lot more geared towards being fair decks game one, not unfair decks.
Well, it just begs the question of how good the counterbalance lock is against them, which is rather good, but he only does have 3 copies of counterbalance, though he does have an Enlightened Tutor to help find one.
Yeah, he has an Enlightened Tutor to find it. He does have Force of Wills in his main deck, along with 1 copy of Counterspell. So he does have some ways to interact, but, you know, those Swords to Plowshares and that Humility and Jace the Mind Sculptor, pretty awkward cards against a deck that can win on turn 1, potentially.
Yeah, and, you know, it kind of begs the question, does he know what he's up against? He's going to play Sensei's Divine Top and pass the turn. He does have a counterbalance in his hand along with a Force of Will, so he's got some nice protection here, as Hunter did play a Ponder on turn 1 to get day 2 rolling. Here's a Brainstorm.
Yeah, Brian looks like he has a pretty good hand to interact with this Ad Nauseam Tendrils deck. He drew basically all his anti-combo cards in the first game, which is exactly kind of what you need to do.
Yeah.
He got a little fortunate here, but Wilson still has a lot of action. I think he might even have a Duress in his hand, so we'll see if he can actually try to get rid of that counterbalance this turn.
2 cards off of the Brainstorm go back. Pluto Delta will get sacrificed, make it a perfect Brainstorm. Hunter's going to go down to 19. Likely to search out a black source. We'll just see if it's going to be basic Swamp or an Underground. It is basic Swamp. Chances are he's going to try to fire off that Duress here that you did mention, but again, Brian does have a Force of Will and another blue card in his hand, so this may be worth fighting over.
Yeah, I think Brian knows just how powerful Counterbalance Top is in general, but against Ad Nauseam Tendrils in particular, it's actually really, really good against them. So Brian might actually just fight over this Duress to make sure he can go turn 2 Counterbalance.
Well, here comes that Duress. Brian will look at his hand.
Let's see, how much does he want that counterbalance in play on turn 2? He's debating it.
He brought the Force of Will forward, and it looks like he will Force of Will this using a Brainstorm, using 2 very key resources here to get rid of that Duress, but that means he's trying to protect something powerful, and as we know, he does have a counterbalance in his hand. Assuming he does have the second land, as there's a Volcanic Island, and there's the 1-2 punch.
And obviously, Brian doesn't want to have to use a card like Force of Will in a matchup like this, but, you know, having that combination in play is just so powerful, particularly against Ad Nauseam, because they have a lot of their key cards are 1 and 2 mana spells.
Hunter is going to cast a Ponder, daring Brian to put the Sensei's Divine Top back on top of his deck.
Yeah, he might want to just blind flip here with Counterbalance. Don't think he needs to actually activate, but it looks like that is what he's going to do. He wants to counter the Ponder, make sure that Wilson doesn't get any more card manipulation. And just remember, for those at home who follow the Open Series, Brian does have a lot of experience with Ad Nauseam Tendrils. He has played the deck in several Open Series prior.
A lot of stories of just how hard he had to try to actually work with the deck. He says the deck is definitely powerful, but you have to work pretty hard for your wins, as there's Sensei's Top yet again to establish the counterbalance lock. I think he knows exactly how powerful the Storm deck can be, which is very, but he has found a way to really slow it down this game. And you see Wilson's hand, he's got a bunch of lands, he's got a Dark Ritual, and not much else. So his Brainstorm and his Ponder didn't really provide very much. His Duress got countered, and now he's kind of in the hard lock.
Yeah, he's got Infernal Tutor and Dark Ritual in his hand and just lands. And now Brian's got Top going. It looks like he revealed an Enlightened Tutor and a Counterspell in his top, so now he drew the Counterspell. So he's in really good shape right here. And he also has that Enlightened Tutor too, so he can actually search for either a Blood Moon or a Thopter Foundry. Thopter Foundry, it works well with the Sword of Meek that he already has in his hand.
Yeah, he might probably, I think he may search for the combo here, or the other half of the combo, actually just as a means to close this game out, as Miracles does take a little while to win. But again, since he does have top counterbalance and fetch lands in play, he's not in a huge rush. He knows that he's basically got Hunter locked out of the game right now.
Yeah, he could always Enlightened Tutor for a 1-drop like a Sensei's Divine Top if he needs to, if he can't find them.
Here's a Preordain. Brian is going to reveal Enlightened Tutor, so that will counter that.
Yeah, if Brian can actually just keep a 1 and 2 drop on top of his deck for the rest of the game, there's really almost no way Wilson can kind of win.
Yeah.
The problem is that his top of his decks keep changing. So looks like he does have a Stoneforge Mystic there. I like drawing the Stoneforge Mystic because, like you said, that's a way for him to actually apply pressure without committing too much mana to the board.
Now, the little scary thing there is if he does take the Stoneforge Mystic and actually cast it, then he'll have the 2 fetch lands as mana sources, but he'll have Stoneforge Mystic will shuffle his deck, and then he'll have to shuffle his deck with Arid Mesas and Scalding Tarn if he wants to actually try to hit with Counterbalance. So, again, I think this is a situation where Brian's really just going to play this slowly, look to, you know, find some lands, put some lands into play, and because he knows I'm not in a rush, there's really nothing Wilson can do to get himself out of this.
Yeah, it's possible he's just going to have, a 1 and 2 on top of his deck for the rest of the game and just try to eventually get a Vendilion Click there.
Yeah. It's just going to be something where he just kind of slow plays it, makes sure that he doesn't do anything wrong in this situation. As it looks like he is going to go forward maybe with the Stoneforge, and he will. So he's going to trigger this. We'll see exactly which equipment he wants to search up. He's going to go get the Batter Skull. And he will shuffle his deck. So now the top of his deck is a mystery, but he does have Sensei's Divine Top in play, so at the very least he'll have a 1 if he wants one.
I'm surprised he didn't crack one of his fetch lands now as well.
Me too. Me too.
I could understand wanting to have 1 so you can get a recycle, but you're going to have to crack 1 in order to activate top anyway, so you might as well just save a little time. But either way, it's really not going to change the sequencing, I don't think.
Duress the draw here for Hunter. You see his hand, he's still got that Dark Ritual and Infernal Tutor. Really can't do a ton, though. And it's kind of interesting where, we've seen the dominance of Bug Delver and just bug decks in general over the past couple of months. And when you think of the bug decks, of course, you think of Abrupt Decay, which kind of keeps counterbalance decks in check. But it doesn't look like a ton of that deck has showed up this particular weekend. And with Brian already off to a beautiful start here with the Miracles deck, he's probably just looking to fade the Abrupt Decay decks.
Yeah, we were watching Joel Assat and Chris Van Meter play the Miracle Mirror earlier yesterday. And we said the same thing, where Abrupt Decay kind of kept Counterbalance in check. But we're not seeing a lot of Abrupt Decay decks around here. And Counterbalance Top is still one of the most powerful combinations you can have in Legacy. This deck put up great numbers at the Legacy Grand Prix in Paris. So a lot of players started adopting here in the States. Yeah,
Miracles is, again, it's a pretty tough deck to play, and it's time-consuming, but it's arguably one of the best decks in the format. And there's so many different ways that you can build it. Brian looking at a Terminus, a Jace the Mind Sculptor, and his Sensei's Divining Top on top of his deck. After cracking his fetch land and going down to 18, he will reveal the top to counter the Duress. And Hunter said, you know what, that is enough for me. So Brian Braun-Duin, who has decided he does not want to lose at all this weekend, up a game here with Blit Red Miracles over Wilson Hunter and his Ad Nauseam Tendrils deck. Take a look at the sideboards. I've got Tendrils' sideboard in front of me. I'm looking at Tropical Island, 4 copies of Xantid Swarm, 2 Abrupt Decays, an Ad Nauseam, 2 Thoughtseize, an Inquisition of Kozilek, 2 Massacre, and 2 Chain of Vapors. In this particular matchup, Osip, I feel like you really just have to try to kill them as quickly as you can, because once they establish the counterbalance lock, yes, Hunter does have 2 copies of Abrupt Decay to break it up, but I think it might be an issue where he just has to try to go off as fast as he can in this situation. He can't really strive to play a longer game.
Yeah, it seems very difficult to kind of play the long game against a deck like Miracles, simply because they have too many outs to what you're trying to do. So I agree with you. I think this is the kind of thing where you don't want to dilute your deck too much. Cards like Carpet of Flower actually are pretty good in this matchup, but I'm not sure if he has any of those.
Yeah, no Carpet of Flowers in the sideboard. Again, I expect him to bring in the 2 copies of Abrupt Decay, the Tropical Island in his sideboard to supplement that, and then he's got 2 Ad Nauseams, an Inquisition, and 2 Thoughtseizes, an Inquisition, and then a Singleton Ad Nauseam in his sideboard. I could see him boarding in some combination of those cards, but again, it's all about speed here, as the longer he kind of waits to go off and get things set up, the more chances that Brian actually is going to be able to find a counterbalance as a Sensei's Divining Top, as we saw in that game, actually have the time to Enlighten Tutor for things and get the job done. So we'll see exactly how Hunter moves forward here for game 2.
Yeah, and on Brian's side, again, game 1, we kind of felt that that's not really the game he's likely to win, but when you draw turn 1 top, turn 2 counterbalance, along with the Force of Will backup, it's pretty good to beat any deck. So Brian managed to win the first game. And after board, though, that's actually where it gets a little bit better for him. He has 2 copies of Meddling Mage, which actually are pretty good in this matchup, because not only can they disrupt Wilson, but they can actually allow Brian to put a little pressure on Wilson's life total. He has 1 copy of the Detention Sphere, 1 Engineered Explosives, 1 Piloting Needle, 2 Stoneforge Mystic, a Batter Skull, Elemental Blast, Enlightened Tutor, 1 Wear and Tear, and 2 Rest in Peace. Not much else that's devastating against Wilson. I mean, we have seen some Miracle players play cards like, Chalice of the Void, but there's really nothing in here that kind of stop the Storm count from Wilson. So Meddling Mage is really the only auto include. He could bring in Rest in Peace to kind of stop the graveyard. It takes off Threshold from Cabal Ritual. It also turns off the Blast and Flames. So that is another option for him. But beyond that, there's really not that much that I think Brian can board in. He does have 4 copies of Source of Plowshare, which, have to come out. Humility is another card that probably has to come out. And the Terminus, while Wilson isn't a creature-based deck, he can actually backdoor into an Empty the Warren's Win. So I actually kind of like leaving some of the Terminuses in, but Source of Plowshare and Humility are definitely cards that I probably want to take out. So that's 5 cards that Brian has to bring out. So I would say the Meddling Mages come in, probably 2 copies of Rest in Peace, and probably the second Enlightened Tutor that he has in the sideboard as a way to just find the counterbalance top block.
The one thing that is interesting that you brought up is the backdoor Empty the Warrens kill. Hunter's version of Ad Nauseam Tendrils is more of a Grim Storm version that we don't see a lot in the Open Series. There are 2 copies of Grim Tutor here, and then there's a singleton Empty the Warrens that he can actually find in his main deck. A lot of the times when you think of Tendrils, depending on the version, some versions do have Burning Wish to be able to find the Tendrils and kill you. Other versions may have 2 copies of Tendrils in the main deck. Wilson Hunter here has access to a Tendrils and an Empty the Warrens, and chances are Brian will, obviously you talk about boarding out Swords of Plowshares in his creature elimination, which makes sense. He doesn't have access to the deck list like he would in the elimination round, so he probably doesn't know that Wilson Hunter has an Empty the Warrens in his main deck, because that is not traditional in Storm. So I wouldn't be surprised here in one of these sideboarded games, if we do go to 3, that maybe an Empty the Warrens steals one of these games.
Yeah. The other thing to be worried about if you're Brian is Xanthic Swarm. You don't really want Swords to Plowshares, and I think you probably board them out. But again, he doesn't know whether or not Wilson's going to be bringing in Xanthic Swarm, because Xanthic Swarm is not one of those cards that you see as an auto for in every Storm list. A lot of these Storm decks are different, and Brian might not even know what version Wilson is yet, because he didn't really see that much out of Wilson other than the standard, Dark Ritual, Duress, etc. So it's kind of going to be interesting to see how Brian decides to sideboard here. He might kind of just shave some numbers, but not give up totally on his creature removal. Just because he's not sure what he's going to have to face against after board. We saw Brian play a version of Ad Nauseam Tendrils that boarded into Dark Confidants and more, cards like Discard, like Cabal Therapy. So if Wilson does have Dark Confidant, that's a card that would be a good target for Swords to Plowshare. Brian just doesn't know. Yeah,
and we saw that yesterday, Eric Rill against Reed Duke. Eric Rill, player who has 2 top 8s on the Open Series with Storm, and he did board in Dark Confidants against Reed Duke. Wasn't able to get the job done. A timely Thoughtseize by Reed, allowing himself to discard an Iona, Shield of Emeria, and put it into play via Reanimate. Won things for Duke in that match, but Dark Confidant was very important for Rill in game number 2, which he ended up winning against Reed. So again, there are creature sideboard plans for these Storm decks. Hunter does have Xanthic Swarm in his. We saw Rill with Dark Confidant in his version of Storm. So it begs the question if Brian will leave in maybe 1 or 2 copies of Swords of Plowshares just to kind of hedge. As we did mention, Brian does have experience playing Storm and Dark Confidant in his sideboard. So we'll see exactly what he wants to do here with sideboarding of the Blue Red Miracles deck. Again, Hunter will be on the play for game number 2 here of round 9 of 16. Our first of many this morning in Charlotte. Both players look like they're good to go, and we're underway here momentarily for game number 2.
Looks like both players are deciding if they want to keep their opening 7. Good thing about the Miracles deck, it doesn't really have to mulligan very often.
No, not at all.
Because of Top and Brainstorm, you have a lot of resiliency in the kind of hands you can keep.
Enlightened Tutor, the first draw here for Brian.
And it looks like he has a pretty solid hand. He's got a Force of Will. He's got multiple copies of Brainstorm, and like you said, he has that Enlightened Tutor, so he can actually search up a counterbalance for turn 2.
Scalding Tarn will be the start. And there is a pass. Hunter will take a draw. No turn 1 play from the Storm deck is a little bit strange. That's got to be a little bit scary because they have so many different things they can do on turn 1. Ponder, Preordain, Brainstorm, Duress, Cabal Therapy, Thoughtseize, all within the realm of possibility for a Storm deck, and nothing happened.
And it looks like he did have the Brainstorm in his hand, but it looks like he wanted to save it for turn 2 to get a little more value out of it so he can actually play a sack land and see the most number of cards. And that's a play that you see a lot of players, who are familiar with the deck. You don't necessarily have to cast Brainstorm on turn 1 if you don't think you're going to go off on turn 2. This lets you get a little card deeper, and it also makes you shuffle away. It allows you to shuffle away more cards that you don't want to see again.
Hunter going to play a Tropical Island off that Scalding Tarn. He's going to go down to 19. Tropical Island has to set up some red flags here for Brian, as that's not a card that they typically have in their main deck. It does facilitate a lot of their sideboard cards. That's mostly like a Carpet of Flowers, maybe an Abrupt Decay, as he's going to lead off with Brainstorm here. Brian says that's okay. So 3 cards coming. Among them was a Xanthic Swarm. Wasn't sure if he was going to board those in or not.
Yeah, so Xanthic Swarm definitely going to play a factor here, because I don't think Brian has any creature removal in his hand, let alone in his deck, possibly after board. So Wilson can actually play a second land here, and if he has a second Tropical Island, he can play the Xanthic Swarm this turn.
Could also play it off the Lotus Petal that he does have in his hand. Not sure if that's the best use of Lotus Petal in this particular game, but we'll see, as he does just have 1 Tropical Island in his sideboard, none in the main deck.
Yeah, so it looks like Wilson's going to have to kind of bide his time here. looking at a potential turn 4 kill possibly. But Brian, it looks like he's going to sack Scalding Tarn. I'd be surprised if he doesn't just go for a counterbalance here.
Yeah. And he's going to get a Tundra, and he's going to cast Enlightened Tutor. Enlightened Tutor, a lot of targets in his deck. Again, he's got a Blood Moon, he's got a Humility, he's got Counterbalance, Sensei's Divining Top, Rest in Peace. He's got a lot of nice things that he can go searching for. Heck, even a Batter Skull sometimes if the situation calls for it. He also has the Sword of the Meek, Thought Profoundry combo. But he's only playing one Enlightened Tutor in his main, and then he has an additional one in his sideboard. So he's not overloading on that effect, but when he does draw it, he can kind of sculpt a game plan around it.
So it looks like he's looking at his hand. Again, he counterbalance even without top, because he has 2 copies of Brainstorm in his hand, still can be very effective. But it looks like he's going for the Rest in Peace instead. He wants to turn off Wilson's Past in Flames, potentially turn off any Cabal Ritual Threshold. But it doesn't look like Rest in Peace is going to be that devastating for Wilson's hand right now. But I think actually counterbalance is probably a little bit more devastating, but maybe Brian's afraid of the turn 3 kill. So Rest in Peace can potentially have a greater impact to stop that.
Yeah, this is really interesting here because by getting a Rest in Peace, obviously Brian's making a very loud statement of I'd like to shut off your graveyards and your Past in Flame skills. He's going to play Island and play Rest in Peace. However, now that Wilson doesn't have his graveyard, he knows that, okay, I have to win manually. I can't do it via Past in Flames, which Storm is more than capable of doing.
Yeah, and it looks like Wilson actually has an Abrupt Decay in his hand as well.
Sure.
So he even has an answer to the Rest in Peace. So it turns out like I don't think it would have mattered either way because obviously Abrupt Decay can also take out a counterbalance as well. But yeah, it definitely sends a clear signal to Wilson as to what Brian's intentions are.
I am a little surprised here from Wilson Hunter that he's searching up basics as opposed to non-basics. I suppose he could be a little bit scared of Blood Moon, but I'd be surprised if Blood Moon was in Brian's deck after sideboard. I think being able to search for the non-basics is a bit of a free roll at this point. However, he does continue to search up basics, and we saw that in the first game as well.
Yeah, so Wilson playing very conservatively here. He does not want to lose to Blood Moon. Now he has a number of options. It looks like he does have a 3rd land, but I don't think he has a 2nd green source in his deck to search out. So he can go Xanthic Swarm, or he can try to Abrupt Decay the Rest in Peace this turn. But it looks like he's going to lead with the Xanthic Swarm, which I like.
So here are the Busy Bees. And Brian going to take a look at his hand, see how much he actually cares about that. You do see there the Xanthic Swarm. When Xanthic Swarm attacks, if any player can't play spells this turn. Now, that doesn't mean that Counterbalance can't counter anything. You can still spin top and activate Counterbalance and all this stuff for spells. As now, a Lotus Petal will come down for Wilson Hunter as well. But if Brian is relying on Force of Will or something else, that'll stop it from happening. A great tool against control decks for combo.
Yeah, so now Brian actually, that Force of Will in his hand, unless he's able to deal with the Xanthic Swarm or prevent it from attacking, it won't actually be able to stop Wilson from comboing off.
Brian going to start his turn off with a Brainstorm here, and as he does draw these 3 cards, Vendilion Click, a Red Elemental Blast, and a Sensei's Divining Top, you saw that Brian did have a Force of Will plus a blue card in his hand, but if you counter the Xanthic Swarm, then Xanthic Swarm's really done its job, right?
Yep. And that's one of the annoying things about Xanthic Swarm, but at the same time, if Brian doesn't have any removal left in his deck for Xanthic Swarm, he might just still counter it simply because if you counter the Xanthic Swarm, even though you don't have another counterspell in your hand, Wilson doesn't know that.
Yeah, sure.
Now if Wilson's able to attack with Xanthic Swarm, he has free reign. He knows you can't do anything, so he's a lot more confident and he has perfect information. So it might just be a battle of wills there, kind of like a little gamesmanship, but either way, it looks like Brian needs to kind of dig to find an answer for that Xanthic Swarm.
The first question here is, does Brian have a 3rd land to play? He casts a Brainstorm here. You see some Stoneforge Mystics, the Force of Will that we did mention, a Red Elemental Blast that looks like he may be putting back on top of his deck. I'm not sure he has another land to play in order to shuffle and do some other things. He's going to tap that mana, maybe deploy a top. He will.
Yeah.
I don't think he has a 3rd land.
He has a lot of good spells. He's got that Force of Will, which obviously he won't be able to use if Xanthic Swarm hits him, but he has a Spindilian Click in his hand as well, but without a 3rd mana, yeah, he's in a tight spot right here.
All right. Passing the turn back over to Wilson Hunter, the other 8-0 here in our Invitational. He'll untap that Tropical Island. He's going to take a draw. You see a Lotus Petal there. He's got an Abrupt Decay. It looks like he may have some ritual effects. The big question is, does he have an Infernal Tutor or an Ad Nauseam?
Yeah, I think he might have the Infernal Tutor, and I think he might have a Lion's Eye Diamond as well. So looks like he might go off this turn.
He's going to think about this one pretty long and hard as he does slide through his hand. Going to start by attacking with the Swarm and the Trigger. So no spells here for Brian due to the attack. and he's just going to pass the turn back. So Brian is safe at this point, and he'll take a draw. Obviously, we know it's not a land, it's the red elemental blast.
Yeah, so maybe, I think Wilson might have had, I think he has the abrupt decay to deal with Rest in Peace. But maybe he felt that since Brian doesn't have a third land, he can kind of slow play it a little bit. But now Counterbalance is going to come down.
Yeah, I was going to say, Brian with a huge brainstorm here. He not only found a land in the island, but the last card was a Counterbalance. Now he's got to put a couple of cards back, rearrange his library as such, because he's not going to have mana to spin the top around, but I do believe that he will deploy the Counterbalance this turn. That being said, again, we do know that Wilson Hunter has an Abrupt Decay in his hand, so...
Yeah, the great thing about this is that he found a basic island, so he can put 2 cards on top of his library and make sure that they're either a 1 or 2 so that they can flip with Counterbalance, and he won't have to shuffle his library to find that land because it's a basic island.
Yeah.
So pretty good sequence here for Brian. Again, Wilson does have that Abrupt Decay, but if he uses it on the Counterbalance, that means that Rest in Peace is still in place, so it's going to be harder for him to go off.
Yep. There's Counterbalance, a perfect Abrupt Decay target. Wilson Hunter is going to use the Abrupt Decay, says, I don't want anything to do with this, so get that right off of the table. Obviously, Brian, if he does flip it too, would not counter because Abrupt Decay is uncounterable.
Yeah, unlike Crossing Grip, where split second, you actually could counter Crossing Grip with a Counterbalance. Abrupt Decay says, nope, you're not countering it no matter what.
Lotus Petal comes rolling off the top here for Hunter. We saw him play one of those earlier this game, which is still in play. He'll attack with Xanthan Swarm yet again, scare Brian a little bit, and just pass the turn back.
Oh, wow, yeah, so I thought Wilson might have had an Infernal Tutor in his hand, but yeah, it looks like he just has mana, a lot of mana.
Yeah, I mean, he's one draw step away from finding that, and if he does find it, he'll be able to go from 0 to 60, as Brian's going to spin top on his upkeep. Looking at 2 cards, which he already knew, the third one down was a Meddling Mage, which is what he's drawn.
So Meddling Mage can come down now. Even though he's not able to interact with Wilson on his turn because of Xanthic Swarm, Meddling Mage is a little proactive card, allows him to start damaging Wilson, but also name a key card that Wilson will need to go off.
So this begs the question, what card do you actually name in this situation?
If I had to guess, I'd say probably Infernal Tutor.
Okay.
Ad Nauseam, there's only one Ad Nauseam really in his deck, I think.
Yeah, he's got one in his main and then one in his sideboard.
Yeah, if I was Brian, I'd probably name Infernal Tutor. It's too hard to name Rituals, I think, but...
Well, there is Chris Pakula.
We will get confirmation as to what he named. And yes, there is the good artwork for Meddling Mage. The Chris Pakula artwork.
He's in the house. He's going to be naming something, and he's going to go with Tendrils of Agony. So in order for Wilson Hunter to be able to win this game, chances are he's going to have to get that Meddling Mage off the table again. We do know he has an Empty the Warrens in his main deck. We don't know if he left it in or not, but we do know that he has access to one throughout his 75.
And the Tendrils naming might be due to the way Brian had played Tendrils in the past. He actually boarded in Dark Confidence an additional Tendrils of Agony to kind of fight through Graveyard Hate. So that might be why he named Tendrils of Agony. But again, with the Rest in Peace, it's sometimes a little hard to go off with that Tendrils plan. So Wilson still has access to just a straight up Empty the Warrens win. But again, he just doesn't have any action yet.
After the attack with Xanthan Swarm, he's going to cast Cataxian Probe. He wants to see what Brian's got. It's a Force of Will, Vendilion Click, the Sensei's Divine Top, and a Stoneforge Mystic. Again, that Force of Will is essentially shut off, but that Vendilion Click, probably the most important card in Brian's hand right now.
Yeah, he can not only cast it on Wilson's turn if he chooses before the Xanthic Swarm attacks, but now Wilson knows, okay, he's got a flyer that can actually block and kill my Xanthic Swarm if I ever try to attack again.
Wilson going to sacrifice the Polluted Delta. Going to go down to 17, I believe. We'll see what he does find.
Yeah, so Wilson just blanked on an action spell for too many turns, and Brian, even though he missed the land drop, he's slowly just gaining a dominating board position.
The big question is, what did he draw off that Cataxian Probe? As he does search out a basic island yet again, not a non-basic, maybe out of fear to Blood Moon. Chances are that Wilson Hunter does know what Brian is playing in this tournament. Brian been surfing around the top tables, and he is a big name player, so their decks are typically kind of found out through word of mouth through the crowd.
Yeah, if Wilson ever had a chance to go off, it would be this turn, because next turn is really, he has no shot because Xanthic Swarm won't be able to deal combat damage to Brian or attack Brian, and then Force of Will is going to get turned on too.
Taking a look at 3 cards here. From a Ponder, Hunter Gonna figure out what he wants to do. Again, he's looking at a pretty powerful hand. He's got a couple Lotus Petals. The Lion's Eye Diamond is key for the interaction with Infernal Tutor and Hellbent. But it doesn't look like he found an Infernal Tutor, but he will consult his hand here.
Yeah, he just needs that Infernal Tutor. Like that, he has plenty of mana to go off. He's just not able to find anything. And yeah, it looks like it's just more mana. So see if he wants to keep it or just shuffle and try to get lucky and find one chance for Infernal Tutor. But no, he's going to keep it. Oh, no, he did find an Infernal Tutor. Okay. So let's see what he decides to do here. I have to imagine he's going to try to go for it this turn. It's not going to get any better for him. He can't let Brian untap and use the Vendilion Click.
Yeah. Brian's shields are completely down. Wilson Hunter has to, the one thing he has to worry about is just that Meddling Mage and Tendrils of Agony, and if he can go off through it, if he has a way to get that thing off of the table again. He's got another copy of Abrupt Decay. He has 2 Chain of Vapors in his sideboard as well. He could, assuming that he boarded in his Ad Nauseam, he could go off that way. He has an Empty the Warrens in his main deck too. He is certainly going through the motions, but as he does cast a couple copies of Lotus Petals, it's obviously time to get moving.
Yeah, and this is kind of why I felt Brian was probably better off naming Infernal Tutor.
Okay.
Simply because it just gives Wilson more options. Whereas now, I'm not really sure. Even if Brian does have that Melee Mage on Tendrils, Wilson does have plenty of options here. He does have, like you said, he has the Empty the Worms. He can find it in Ad Nauseam to help him try to find more ritual effects, another Abrupt Decay to deal with Meddling Mage, so a lot more options for Wilson here because he has that tutor effect.
Your storm count is already very, very high here. It started with a Gataxian Probe into a Ponder into 2 Lotus Petals. That's 4. Lion's Eye Diamond is 5. Dark Ritual 6. Cabal Ritual 7. Infernal Tutor is 8. Infernal Tutor on the stack hold priority, bust the Lion's Eye Diamond. Now he's going to go up here, see what he's going to find.
So Cabal Rituals for 3 because the Rest in Peace turned off the threshold. So, but still plenty of mana to work with, and he's going to find that Ad Nauseam.
Okay. And with those 3 Lotus Petals in play as well, he has plenty of mana to get rolling. Again, this is a sideboard Ad Nauseam. He does not have one in his main deck. His main deck configuration is just a little bit different. Again, 2 copies of Grim Tutor. He's 100% reliant on Past in Flames to get the job done game number 1. But being able to board into this powerful instant, especially in sideboarded games, is obviously paying in spades this game.
And again, that Xanthic Swarm has been triggered this turn. So Brian is just sitting helplessly. He cannot cast any spells.
And there's a Dark Ritual. There's an Infernal Tutor. Wilson's life total very high as he's going to turn over a Lotus Petal. And now a Gataxian Probe. Down to 13 we go. Thoughtseize makes it 12. This Delta still safe. So he's very careful here.
I believe he might have played a land this turn. I'm not sure.
He has not played a land. He fetched a little while ago, but he has not played a land.
That island came into play, but that was off a fetch, yeah.
Well, let's make it 11. Let's make it 9. Now he's looking for an LED. Just trying to looking at things, see if I can find a way to empty my hand. Not just yet. 8 from the Xanthic Swarm.
Ooh.
4 from the Past in Flames.
That was a tough one.
Decisions. He does have 2 other 4-mana spells in his deck and a Tendrils and an Empty the Warrens. 3 from his Xanthic Swarm.
Yeah,
Will
he needs
he
an
kill
LED.
himself?
All right.
Okay, this is a real sweat. 1.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Oh, boy.
I don't really, he can't really do it anymore.
It might be time to put on the brakes. Now, he's got a couple Lotus Petals in play. There's Lotus Petal in there. There's an Infernal Tutor, which isn't going to play a huge role because he can't get the cards out of his hand. He's got that Dark Ritual. The problem, Hero Sip, is that, he's in 1.
Yeah.
But, Brian has a Meddling Mage out there that can just attack for lethal. Sure, he could play the Xanthic Swarm and block with that. But, again, he's not in a great spot.
I think he's actually not in terrible shape because he can still... he can still cast some spells. Like he can still cast Gataxian Probe because he has.
Cast?
Yeah, he can hard cast. Yeah. He's got plenty of Lotus Petals. I believe he'll have all 4 Lotus Petals.
Yeah, he's got 3 in play and then one off of the Ad Nauseam. You see Brian's going to kind of write down the contents or at least get the contents down. Going to separate the cards. Wilson Hunter to help Brian out a little bit here. Where do we go from here?
Yeah,
Thoughtseize is like a dead card. The Past in Flames is obviously dead. There are very few cards of importance here.
Yeah. Polluted Delta is dead, Thoughtseize is dead, Past in Flames is dead, the Xanthic Swarms are dead. So he basically has 2 Gataxian Probes, a Lotus Petal, and 2 Rituals. So he still has plenty of mana. He can play the Volcanic Island for the turn. He can cast a Taxing Probe off that. Try to draw one card deeper. If he can hit a Lion's Eye Diamond, he's right back into it.
Yeah. Lion's Eye Diamond, I think, actually seals it.
He also has a second Taxing Probe, so he could even, if he needs to, he could Infernal Tutor, revealing a Taxing Probe to find another.
Sure.
And cast that one as well to dig a little deeper.
There's Taxing Probe. What did he draw? He drew a Ponder, so if he would have kept going, he would have died.
So now Ponder gives him a little more action. Again, I believe he has all 4 Lotus Petals in play, or he will.
He has 3 in his hand, or excuse me, 3 in play, 1 in his hand from this Ad Nauseam. The question here is, does he want to cast Ponder? Does he want to lead off with Dark Ritual into Cabal Ritual, which again will not be Threshold because of Rest in Peace? Looks like he's going to sacrifice, maybe, one of these Lotus Petals as he slides everything on the screen for you guys at home. There does go a Lotus Petal. Here is a Ponder.
Yeah, because if he can hit a Lion's Eye Diamond, he could actually search for Empty the Warrens and make a... there it is.
Tendril's not a big deal.
Can't do anything with Tendrils, but it looks like he might have a Grim Tutor as well.
But Grim Tutor you have to pay life to cast.
Ah, yeah.
So that's not going to do it either.
So it's basically Lion's Eye Diamond, draw the Lion's Eye Diamond, find Empty, and try to win with Empty, which I believe he has a pretty good Storm count.
His Storm count is rather healthy. There you do see the Grim Tutor, a very expensive, rare tutor. Part of the price, obviously, is that you do lose 3 life to do that. With him at 1, not the most appealing option. Now, we're not entirely sure how much mana is floating here for Wilson Hunter, but we do know that he has a Dark Ritual, and he does have an LED in his hand. Well, he presumably will have an LED in his hand here, as you see him taking a look. The big question now, as he's really kind of racking his brain, is the amount of time that he's taking. It feels like maybe he didn't leave Empty in.
Yeah, you'd think if, given the situation, you kind of know how he's supposed to win. There's a Meddling Mage on Tendrils and a Rest in Peace in play. Clearly, Empty is probably your only path to victory here. Did he even keep them in? Maybe he was afraid of Terminus. I don't know. But yeah, I'm with you. The fact that he's thinking this long, he might just be trying to make sure he has all the mana to maximize every kind of casting every spell he can. But yeah, it's strange because obviously I think LED is the card you need in this situation.
It felt like the card he needed when he was going off, and that's why he kept going, because he was looking for an LED. Now he's consulting this very large hand from the Ad Nauseam along with the 3 cards from the Ponder, and he's trying to figure out, okay, what can I do? Obviously, I have free reign from Xanthosworm attacking what feels like ages ago, but can I get that, maybe that Meddling Mage off of the table with the other Abrupt Decay in my deck and then Tendrils him? What's the configuration of cards I need to be able to do that?
Yeah, it's interesting. If I don't know why he would have boarded out the Empty in this particular matchup. Oh wow, he is going to shuffle, so he's shuffling away the Lion's Eye Diamond. Interesting here.
Well, that is telling. That is very, very telling.
Yeah, so is he just trying to go? I don't even know what could he be trying to go for here. Is he just trying to get a removal spell for the Meddling Mage?
He's got in his sideboard, he has 2 Abrupt Decays. He's already used 1, so there's 1 of those left presumably. He also has 2 copies of Chain of Vapor, so maybe he's looking for 1 of those. Maybe he boarded those in, not too sure.
Yeah, he doesn't have that much mana to work with anymore. I mean, with the LED certainly helped, but maybe he's just trying to find an Abrupt Decay for the Rest in Peace.
Mystery card, wasn't quite sure what that draw was. Drew that one pretty quickly as he does place the Ponder into the graveyard. It's a Underground Sea. He's already played his land of Volcanic Island, so that one's a brick too.
Yeah, I have to imagine he probably boarded out Empty.
Yeah, at this point, it seems like that would be the case. Again, we could be wrong here in the booth, but based off of his plays, it seems like that may be gone. He's going to sacrifice Lotus Petal now. Let's see what this is going to be.
Yeah, and I believe that's his last card draw, so he's basically working with what he has in his hand right now.
That's another copy of Grim Tutor.
Yeah, he just has a bunch of ritual effects. He can Grim Tutor but he doesn't have Hellbend, so he's just going to be able to find the card that's in his hand. None of them will really help him, though.
There's Lotus Petal. Will he play the Xanthosworm in his hand? I mean, he basically has to because he's at 1 life and there's a Meddling Mage in play, so we'll see if he does see that he needs to do that.
Get that sweet blocker in play.
He does sacrifice that. There is another copy of the Busy Bees. Those things are on blocking duty. And if Brian does find a card like a Source of Plowshares or something, get it out of the way, it would be a lethal attack.
So looks like Wilson here is going to have to discard down to 7. Yeah, so really interesting situation there. It looked like Wilson was going to be able to go off that turn. He got a little unlucky with Ad Nauseam, but then he was able to Ponder into the LED. We think, oh, well, that's it. That's going to be able to turn on his Empty the Warrens now. But then he shuffled it away. So I guess that means that he just boarded out his Empty the Warrens.
I mean, presumably he boarded in a lot of reactive cards, which wouldn't surprise me. Again, a couple copies of Abrupt Decanis sideboard. He's brought in a lot of Xantid Swarms, right? So you look at his sideboard here, he's got 4 Xantid Swarms, a Tropical Island, 2 Abrupt Decays. At the very least, that's 7 cards. Now, Tropical Island swaps out for a land, sure. So he's got a board in 6 and 4 Xantid Swarms and 2 Abrupt Decays. That also means that he has to board out 6 cards. So it would be very easy for him to board out and empty the Warrens and some other cards here, as Wilson Hunter is going to take a step away, probably ask a judge for a question. But as we analyze exactly what he can board out here, I mean, I'm no Storm expert, but the decisions here on what to board out are very difficult, and it wouldn't surprise me if the first thing to go would be a copy of Empty the Warrens. We know he has Past in Flames, of course. We know he has Central's Agony. Does he board out discard effects? Probably not. But does he board out a card like Lion's Eye Diamond, Lotus Petal, Dark Ritual, Cabal Ritual? Certainly not. And then he's got the 2 Grim Tutors, which we've both seen this game. Then he's got the Brainstorms, the Ponders, the Probes, and the Preordain.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Clearly, he boarded in a lot of cards, so there's a premium on real estate in his main deck now. But still, Empty the Warrens is one of those cards that, if your goal is to try to go off as fast as possible, that's one of the cards that can really help if you draw it naturally. So a little surprising here, but either way, things are looking great for Brian now. Now he's able to actually play a Vendilion Click. He can actually just attack him. Wilson's going to have to chump block here, and it looks like Brian even revealed a counterspell off his counterbalance in his upkeep. So pretty good situation here for Brian.
So spinning the top, Will BBD, there's the counterspell as he does spin the top. He's also looking at a Red Elemental Blast and a Stoneforge Mystic there. Those cards are not going to play a huge role, especially with Hunter at 1 life. So now Brian, who I'm sure did not think he was going to be in this stage of untapping, he's going to draw a card. It's the Red Blast. Again, Force of Will, along with the Vendilion Click in his hand, looking at a Stoneforge Mystic, looking at that Red Blast that he chose to draw for the turn.
Yeah, I'm surprised he chose to draw Red Blast, considering he doesn't have access to red mana. I figured counterspell plus Force of Will. If Wilson just tries to leave back, if Wilson doesn't draw anything next turn, which is reasonable given what happened, he's going to have to leave that second Xanthic Swarm back to block again.
Yep.
So now your counterspells are all turned on, so you're in pretty good shape. But either way, Brian's still looking in pretty good shape here.
I think step 1 here for Brian is, get that Meddling Mage in there. You've got a block, so there goes your Xantid Swarm. That part's easy. Here's a Stoneforge Mystic. He's going to shuffle, see what equipment he wants to find. Gonna go get a Batter Skull.
All right, so Wilson, if Wilson draws, I guess, an Abrupt Decay or a Chain, he could start trying to empty his hand. He did discard a lot of cards, so if he can actually get a way to get that Meddling Mage off the board, or even, probably more importantly, the Rest in Peace.
Yeah, I think Rest in Peace is causing the biggest problem, but I also think that Wilson likely just discarded the Past in Flames.
No, I think you see it there.
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
I see a red card. So he's got Past in Flames, Infernal Tutor, and a bunch of Ritual effects still, so he needs to get a little lucky here.
See what he drew, Grim Tutor.
Ugh, another Grim Tutor. Well, thankfully, he has another chump blocker in Xanthic Swarm.
Well, the problem here is Stoneforge Mystic plus Meddling Mage presents lethal. He's at 1.
Yeah, well, he has a second Xanthic Swarm in his hand, I think.
Ugh.
So
Yeah.
the problem is, though, now he's not going to be able to attack. So the counterspells from Brian will get turned on next turn.
This feels like maybe the white flag here by playing a Xantid Swarm. Now, this is really interesting, too, because he's playing the Xantid Swarm before attacking with his other Xantid Swarm. Now, we know that he's just on double jump blocking, dude, is what it looks like. But Brian might think, maybe I Force of Will this so I can get in for lethal. And then Wilson maybe does something instead. Now, it would be very easy for Wilson to just say, hey, I'm just going to attack and then do whatever I want to do. So I think Brian needs to, think about this a little bit of what's going on, because it's a little unusual.
Yeah, it is strange that, because Wilson's basically been attacking every time before he's been casting spells for the whole game. So to play a spell before they attack kind of gives Brian a signal that maybe he needs this guy as a blocker.
The play pattern is a little bit different. You see Brian really taking his time here, thinking, well, this is a little bit strange play, given your play pattern over the course of the game. You're always attacking with Xanthic Swarm, whether you're playing spells or not. So maybe you need this thing as a blocker, and chances are you actually kept that. Well, he knows he kept that off of his ad nauseum. So that's a pretty loud signal that, okay, that thing's on blocking duty to give you another turn. And I might not be too interested in that. And so now You see the way he's gripping that Force of Will, and he is going to cast the Force of Will. That's an extension of the hand. Braun-Duin is going to win this match over Wilson Hunter 2-0. Blue-White-Red Miracles gets the job done over Ad Nauseam Tendrils. We've got one undefeated player and one player on the top of our Star City Games Open Series leaderboard. It's the man on the left.
And that was not an easy Force of Will. I mean, it seems like it was, but it really wasn't, because Brian could have easily been falling into a trap there, because Wilson did just refill his hand.
Yeah.
So very good play there from Brian. He read it correctly, and Wilson got a little unfortunate there, but he's still sitting pretty good at 8-1.
Well, it's easy for us.
It's easy for us.
Counter it. But Brian with some very, very impressive play, and truthfully, and I know you've played against Storm, as have I, and Brian's actually piloted Storm. When they attack with a Xantha Swarm and start casting Lotus Petals and things, well, you're just thinking, all right, well, I guess I'll re-sideboard for game 3 and maybe change something up based off of what I've seen. It's very rare for them to actually get out of the turn alive, but that's exactly what ended up happening. So Brian Braun-Duin is going to win this match 2-0. Which is pretty insane, actually. We're gonna treat it, we're gonna see if we can find out, maybe from Andrew Shroud or Nick Miller in the sideboard, if Wilson Hunter did board out empty the Warrens in the matchup. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if he did. Again, based off of just the way that he played the game.